Welcome to the Reel to Reel podcast, where the stories behind the board go on record. I'm your host, Bruce Hensal, and we are here to give you an insider's look at the music industry. I'm joined by my co-host, Jim Myers from the Melrose Center, and this month's guests, Paige Coley and Marc with a C. We're in 4 separate locations, including the audio studio in the Melrose Center at the Orlando Public Library. The first of today's guests is Paige Coley. Paige is a producer, engineer, singer, songwriter, guitarist, educator, pedal builder, and gets the best drum sound in town. Welcome, Paige.
Hi, thank you.
You bet.
Hey, Bruce.
Paige, I just wanted to talk a little bit about your band, Kinder Than Wolves, which is one of my favorite band names in town.
Oh, thank you. I thought it was a little try hard. About a year in to having it.
Yeah?
Yeah,
And,
we almost changed it, but we didn't.
So you're working on a new project now?
For Kinder Than Wolves, yeah. So we took our sweet time, and we had an album's worth of songs in progress. And last year the plan was to finish them up and release them, but then COVID happened, so it didn't look very good, like a very good time to release an album. But now it's been so long since we've put out anything, or it feels like it, 2017, that I think we might just start drip releasing some singles this year and kind of get back on the ship and kind of rebuild some momentum. But yeah.
Good. Well, and I think we're going to be able to give you a sneak peek at one of the tunes from this project called Jenny Cream. And
yeah.
I believe it's about Genesee Cream Ale, a beer I'm very familiar with, and I'm also a big fan of any song about beer.
Yeah, it does. It screams Jenny Cream in the chorus. So
great.
Yeah.
Well, let's take a listen, and we'll be back in a minute.
Strung out on love, make it look like a buzz. Yeah, I'm blitzed again, but I've only had one, and you're on your 3rd or maybe 10th. But I know better than to let Jenny Cream get warm.
All right, that was Jenny Cream by Kinder Than Wolves. So, Paige, in addition to your band work, I understand you have a new job you're working at. You
Oh,
want to
yes.
talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So last week was my first week at Output, and Output makes effects and instruments. And I had been a fan of Output for like 2 years prior to working with them. I had used their instrument arcade, and so I found this job posting about 2.5 years ago now. And it just said audio creative. And so I sent in my resume, and then I didn't hear back for 2 years. And then 2 years later, I got an email that's like, hey, that job is gone, but we noticed that you do post-production and you use RX. Do you want to start contracting for us? And I was like, okay. And so then I contracted at the end of last year for about 4 months, and then I got brought on full-time this year. So kind of getting my bearings this week and you know, figuring out my day-to-day responsibilities. But yeah, so far it's good. I can't believe it. Like, that's so weird that I sent that resume like 2 years ago. And then like 2 years later, I got something from it. That's happened to me more than once in this industry.
Well, it's happened to me several times in this industry. I think it's almost the norm. What exactly is the job that you're doing for them?
So my official title is Audio QC Lead. And so without giving too much away, because of like internal NDA stuff. Yeah, but basically we do have like a process where all of the audio before it gets shipped out to the subscribers is cleaned. Obviously, it needs to be perfect. And then I oversee all of the cleaning that gets done and those processes.
Very cool, very cool. And you get to work from home, which is really good in these times. Somehow you were meant to be in that job at this point in time.
Yeah, very lucky, at least. Very lucky to have a job in a pandemic.
Yes. Well, I think we're about ready for our second guest here today. Please welcome Marc with a C. Marc is a singer, songwriter, musician, author, and local legend. Welcome, Marc.
Hello, thanks for having me, Bruce. How's it going?
Hi, Marc.
Hey, Marc, nice to meet you.
Oh, silly Jim. Nice to see you again. Jim, as much as you and I have done in the past, isn't it bizarre that we've been in a band together and have not been in the same room since December of 2019? Isn't that wild?
Yeah, I think about it when I see the fan videos of that show at Will's. It's great to see, and then I realize, wow, that's the last time we were together as with Emmett. Yeah, it's remarkable and sad.
Marc, I'd like to introduce our other guest, Paige Coley. She's in a band called Kinder Than Wolves, and I think you two have a few mutual friends.
Yeah. Hey, Marc.
Hi, Paige.
I'm so excited to finally meet you.
It's nice to meet you.
Because I've known who you are since forever. Like, since I would just like hang out at coffee shops, like in high school and catch shows that way. And then I think we do have a few mutual friends. Like, I think you've worked with Chris Zabriskie a lot.
Oh gosh. The stories we could tell. He was my stage drummer for about 10 years. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, see, we worked together at this web tech company, but then him and I had mutual friends, and so it just I was bound to meet you at some point. And here it is today.
Sure, and I'm happy it's taking place, not just because you seem very nice and I like to meet other nice people, but in particular, I've been racking my brain since Jim mentioned that we were going to be on the show together, and Jim said a sentence, paraphrased, something like, "Do you know Paige from Kinder Than Wolves?" And I went, I know the name Kinder Than Wolves. Why do I know it? So then I looked it up and went, I have friends who like it. No, I know this. But in 2019, I had a nervous breakdown, and some facts that used to be right on deck no longer are. So thank you. You just helped me solve where I know the name from and where I would know of you from. And it's nice to officially meet you.
Yeah, well, that's totally okay too. Like, because like we've my band's only put out one single EP, so like we're not super well known or anything. So like, yeah, of course, I wouldn't expect you to know or remember the connections. But yeah, I actually wanted to talk to you about that at some point today, about how many records you release.
Oh gosh.
And like how you do that. Would now be a good time, Bruce, to bring that up? Yes.
Sure.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you, because I see that as like one of the biggest differences between us. Like we've put out one record and then like a couple singles, and then you have this whole catalog of like record after record. Like you're super prolific. So how do you decide like when a song is done? And how do you just decide, all right, this is ready for release, I'm going to put this out now?
Oh gosh, unfortunately the answer to that is gonna seem so bleeding metaphysical and like I'm gonna go touch my power crystals afterwards. But the truth is, the songs tell me. I let the songs come out of me, and often that happens by just picking up an instrument and sort of making mouse sounds, just seeing where my fingers land, doing something with it. If that happens a couple of times and it keeps recurring, it doesn't have to be every time I pick up a guitar. In some cases, songs first came out of my fingers when I was 15 and didn't get released until, say, 2016, when the next part of the song appeared. The songs show up and they tell me when they're ready. If I could answer it more directly than that, not only would I'd write a book about it, I'd bottle it, and I'd sell the recipe, because and also, if I could do that, I probably would have much better production on most of my records, because while everything I just told you is true, I usually record in very lo-fi and immediate ways, not because of any other reason but this. I often just want to preserve the sound of me being excited to share it. The sound of me being excited to capture it, the sound of me being excited to play it. And that comes with bum notes all the time, but I will take vibe over perfection, accuracy, and high fidelity every day, all day. I hope that answers your question a little.
Yeah, that is a good perspective. It's so hard to apply that to my own music, but when I'm producing other artists, like that's my mind frame 100%. Like I'm actually working on this lo-fi song for a band called Canine Cat right now. And there's like off time parts and like parts that normally wouldn't make the cut, but because the vibe is right, it's staying in there. Like, you know what I mean? Like we're not going to redo it.
For sure. Yeah. Some of the best parts of classic songs, I mean, songs that have really stood the test of time, are screw-ups. You know, people mention all the time how much they love John Lennon's shouted vocal on Twist and Shout, but that's because it was the end of the session and he had a cold. And my personal favorite that comes to mind immediately, the song I Saw Her Again Last Night by the Mamas and Papas. Denny comes in I want to say like one beat early on the rejoinder of I saw her again, but he just gets I saw her. And then the whole band comes in. And every time they tried to take it away in the mix, apparently the song fell apart. The mistake made the song. And now if you try to imagine it without that part, if you know the song or if you go listen to it, nothing doing. I'm not saying the song would be bad without it, but those happy accidents, they're the texture.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're what make a lot of classic songs jump to the fore. Marc, I wanted to ask you a little about your start as a performer and the origin of the Marc with a C stage name.
It's a pretty oft-told tale on my part, but I'm scanning to see if there's anything new that I've remembered about it since that I can throw in here. At the time, this was December of 1999, I had been working for a band that was they're named Precious, and they had a fairly decently sized local hit. And I know what that sounds like, but it was getting real steam behind it. And the song was Bi-Curious George. The reason it was getting steam was they were about to get signed to a label that later put the band's Whole Wheat Bread and a couple, I think, Grand Buffet as well. So they were straight up contenders. They were maybe going outside the Orlando city limits. I was just a fan of them in general. They'd hired me to be their roadie, i.e. carry the heavy things and man the merch booth so we don't have to be here until it's time to play, and then we can leave. And hey, I still want that to this day for myself. For years, I had thought that Precious was late to get on stage, and it turns out I'm completely wrong. What actually took place was it's a multi-band bill happening at the Kit Kat Club, which thankfully is not much for alliteration. The young lady who had organized this show was freaking out. Someone had canceled. They needed to fill time. The club is very full. Literally, can anyone just get on stage and do a thing? And there were people that were saying like, yeah, I know a song or something like this. Or one person's going, I can juggle. But this is pretty deep into the night. And a lot of alcohol had been consumed by people. I was at work working for Precious, so I had not consumed said alcohol. And I said, yeah, I've got some new songs I've been working on, the kind of silly things that you sing to yourself when you're washing dishes, that you don't even think of as a song, but then when you sing it, everyone goes, I could have written that. So I said, well, I volunteer as tribute, more or less. And I wish I could recall her name. She goes, great, what's your name? She has something written, something in her hand so she can write it down and introduce me to the crowd. I say, my name is Mark. I can see that she writes down M-A-R-K. For no reason that I can come up with, I corrected her. This is not something I make a practice of, and I still don't. Never really did. But for some reason that day when she wrote M-A-R-K, I said, no, it's Mark with a C. And then I just saw her scribble it out on the pad or the index card or whatever it was. She just kind of sighs loudly and she goes, well, come on. Now, I don't have the guitar I'm used to playing or anything. I'm having to use Steve Guerin, the front person of Precious's gear. This is good because I kind of know how to set it up roughly. She just marches onto the stage, grabs the microphone, tells this audience that absolutely positively did not come here to see me, ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Mark. And then she pauses, rolls her eyes so loudly you can practically hear the eye roll, and finishes it, Mark with a C. So everybody in the audience assumed that was my stage name. I was putting across a persona as well, and that's sort of a different story, but the name was kind of invented because I was introduced incorrectly, but I hadn't really given them a real stage name. But by the end of that show, that club that had absolutely not come to see me, people were asking for my card, my CD, things I did not have. But I did give out my number to nearly anyone who asked. And the very next day, my phone started ringing off the hook, asking me when I was available, what my rates were. I'm still getting work based on that one show. That's the story.
Wonderful. Wonderful. I enjoyed that. So, Mark, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about your equipment setup, because that's one of the things we try to ask of all our guests. And then I'm going to toss it over to Jim.
Sure. Do you mean for live performances? Because that can vary massively. Or do you mean in the studio? Can you sort of narrow it down for me?
I would like to jump in here, and I think maybe this is what Bruce might be getting at too, Mark. It's since we're talking about the origin of Mark with a C and early career stuff, I wanted to touch on the first album, Human Slushy, and how that is so much different from what came after, and that there was this bit of a transformation that took place as you were looking for that follow-up album. And I know the story, obviously, but can you go into a little bit about how it went from the Human Slushy album to what everyone then came to know as Bubblegum Romance, and how that kind of set up the aesthetic for your recording technique going forward for a decade or more after that.
Okay, I'll do my best. If I get off track, Jim, you know how long-winded I can be. Someone please do whatever you have to shut me up or guide me somewhere else, okay? In the beginning of Marc with a C, it was just me and an acoustic guitar. And that's what it sounded like if you came to see the show. So I assumed that any recordings should sound that way. In the early demos of Marc with a C, so I could get booked at places that maybe didn't end up at that show at the thankfully non-alliterative Kit Kat Club gig. Well, I did have to start making some demos to show to people. Clubs, booking agents, DJs. I was doing these things on cassette. That's what I had around. 4 tracks, sometimes just cassette Walkmans. These were all good enough for me. Boomboxes to make demos. In my teenage years, karaoke machines, especially the double-deck ones, because then you could just flip the tape back, record right back over it, keep the original track, you'd get some generational loss, but the hiss would sort of become its own instrument. And if you learned how to control that through feedback or something, you could almost turn the hiss into a pulsating rhythm track. These things all excited me. And the person that those absolutely don't excite is the person who noticed, hey, Marc can knock out a catchy tune. Let's record some of them. And that's Joe Panton, bassist of Precious. Now, up till that moment, Joe and I are pretty harmonious. He is, for the first 3 songs that we record, for what became my first album, Human Slushy, he heard me and he listened to me to a point where I said, I would really like this to be acoustic guitar, my voice, and just whatever is needed, maybe percussion-wise, to help propel it and get the feeling across. I don't really want a bunch of bells and whistles. So for those 3 songs, he played drums. He wasn't a drummer by trade, but he's a really good and inventive drummer. So now anything else that had to be recorded needed to somewhat match that. Joe is very good at production, but sort of at the time, one very specific style of production, a very sheened power pop production, which isn't necessarily what those songs called for. And frankly, on that first record, Human Slushy, and I could go on about this all day, and I do in my book, Maybe It'll Be Good, My Life is Marc with a C. If a song seemed like it could elicit a chuckle, he kind of didn't want to do it. He didn't want to record it. And the ones that I would fight for to keep on the record because maybe audiences really liked them, and one thing that had popped up was that 2 of the songs had become singles on Clear Channel stations without any pushing from myself. So we needed this album out. I needed this album out. I was broke, and I'm going, right there, I can be making money. I don't even have these songs copywritten yet. We have to do something right now. He kind of saw that as, in my opinion, a way that he could show off his production prowess and sort of sculpt the record. And I do trust producers to do that. But Joe hadn't really come to Marc with a C shows. He didn't necessarily know what the audiences thought I was, sounded like, or expected. So when we get this very full band thing full of songs I don't play in concert because a lot of them are sort of finished and written to order for Joe's taste. So he will continue to work on the album. The audience that came to the shows didn't really like that. Then the audiences that found me through those songs being played on the radio, when they'd go to a show, they didn't like me. They're like, this doesn't sound like what I heard. I can't blame either camp. I was just kind of caught in the middle. Bubblegum Romance, the second record, when all was said and done, and it eventually came out being recorded, Paige, by Chris Zabriskie. Chris Zabriskie showed me not only was my first initial idea, hey, let's just put a microphone somewhere near it. Let's not mess around too much, unless it's a stupid like Radio Shack mic with like a lot of problems. Let's not mess around with the EQ too much since we're only capturing voice, guitar, and maybe drums occasionally, some bit of percussion. Let's make it sound like you actually sound. He was into the idea. He was willing to show me how easy it was to do. we recorded an album that Joe and I had tried to make for a year and a half before I more or less fired him. Chris and I made that record in 6 hours, and it's still my most in-demand record to this day. After that, I had to learn how to do it myself, and that was a big learning curve. I could record on a 4-track and make it sound like anybody can make it sound, but how to come up with interesting techniques. This all came from being broke. I couldn't go afford neat compression units or anything. I would have to just use the microphone, put it in an interesting position, put myself maybe in an interesting position away from the microphone, or say I needed to double a whole bunch of hand claps, but there's only me. I had to learn that trick of literally putting an instrument mic between the wall and a mirror in the corner so you get a slap back and you can kind of double it. I learned that from liner notes on a Pete Townsend Scoop compilation. That's it. Just finding out when you press play on a record, you can have all the educated guesses in the world of how they got to making those sounds. But the truth is, nobody really knows. Nobody really knows until you tell them. So all I had to do is make it sound like I wanted it to sound. After that, if I thought it was fine, someone, somewhere, if I were to release it, they would also think it was fine. And over the years, I just accrued more and more gear. But even up to and including the most recent record, or it's called Low Fidelity, this one probably uses every recording technique I've ever used all in one place, with the exception of having gone to Canada in 2017 to have an album produced by Jordan Zadarozny of Blanker the Star. My setup at this point, it's not just 4-track anymore. I think that's pretty clear. I ended up having to go digital because, frankly, 4-tracks kept breaking, and when the music industry decided, we're just going for ones and zeros, that's all, this is the deal, this is all you get, we don't like tape anymore, they started pricing them so far out of range that you kind of couldn't not decide, okay, I'll buy a computer. I hated that move, but I saw it coming, I saw the writing on the wall, I went at it just so I could keep creating. Now I'm fairly comfy with it, but if I'm left to it, I still love the tones of cassette saturation as just a bedrock for the rhythm section of any song that I'm going to do. I like to sometimes record that first, then dump it into a computer, and then start playing with the marriage between digitally recorded music and analog captured music. Digital, of course, understands ones and zeros. It knows on or off. But if you push digitally recorded music past its, what term am I looking for here? The general natural baseline of 0, you get a not very pleasing distortion that we know as brick walling. It actually makes the music quieter in weird ways. Where with analog, you can do the same thing, but you get something that we recognize, say if that happens on a vinyl record, our ears mostly recognize that as quote-unquote warmth. Analog and digital are diametrically opposed. I'm finding that I'm happiest when they can coexist without one or the other necessarily being in the lead. Thankfully, sort of coming of age as Marc with a C, in that intersection where society was going to leave analog behind as much as they could to use as much digital equipment as possible, allowed me to make for a really unique sound. I'm not saying I'm the only person that does it or does things this way. I'm certainly not. But if you compare my records to nearly anything else, once I start doing it that way, which starts around 2009 with a very bizarre album that I'm not necessarily saying I recommend, called Losing Salt, I've still never heard any record like that. I don't say that as a pat myself on the back thing. I mean, it was an accident, but it's cool that I've got something unique that I know is my sound. I wasn't too specific about the equipment, but there's like 21 years of it.
But I want to say that you're definitely in the right league with the cassette recording, since that's the guitar sound on "I Can't Get No Satisfaction," is Keith's acoustic through a cassette deck, and that's the origin of that song. So you're following in a well-worn path with that.
Yeah, not a whole lot of people complaining about "I Can't Get No Satisfaction" not rocking. I mean, even if you're not a Stones person, and in full disclosure, I like some moments of the Stones, and those moments I love, but it's maybe not the most famous stuff. Ain't nobody ever turned on "I Can't Get No Satisfaction" up to this day and gone, but the fidelity sucks. Couldn't they have done this in a real studio? Not one. And if they have, I haven't met them.
Marc, you'd mentioned briefly the new record, and as we record this, it's still a couple of days away from being released, but it will be out by the time our wonderful listeners are checking this podcast out. So as you mentioned, it's called Low Fidelity, or How I Spent the Nervous Breakdown, and you're going to play a couple of those songs today from that album. Do you want to do one for us now?
Sure, I'm happy to. When I got right with God, I went to the school where parents send their kids when they're afraid they won't grow up as everything that they wish they were. I read the good book. I even took those parts about shellfish to heart. Just look at my clothes, why don't you? They're only made of one fabric. You gotta get right with God, because you may not get another chance. You can't wait till the last minute, cause all you're gonna be thinking is, I was just in that car wreck, and now I've got no arms, and that hurts like a monster trucker, but I really miss my arms. When I got right with God, they told me crucifixion was better than fighting back, so I got beat down by the kids who said their faith was stronger than the pastor told me. That when I got to heaven, since they're doing the beatdowns right, I'll be meeting Jesus in no time. I'll be first in line. You gotta get right with God, because when you're on your deathbed, it's already too late. And he won't stand for that switcheroo, though you were just in that car wreck. And now you've got no arms, and it hurts like a monster trucker. Boy, you really miss your arms. You gotta get right with God. You gotta get right with God. When you get right with God, some of my fellow followers went on to own their families' go-kart tracks, and still some others went on to plotting revenge against all the guidance counselors who said time on earth is short, but when you get to heaven, this will make more sense. You'll meet Barbara Stanwyck at the grocery store one day. She goes there after all her grandson's football games. You'll share something in common because you have the same faith. And you'll meet someone famous. Ain't loving Jesus great? You gotta get right with God, because you may not get another chance. You can't wait till the last minute. All you're gonna be thinking is, I was just in that car wreck, but now I've got no arms, and it hurts like a monster trucker, and I really miss my arms. I should've got right with God. Oh, I should've got right with God. Yeah, I should've got right with God. I should've got right with God.
That was great. Thank you, Marc. And so I wanted to ask you a little bit about the new album coming out. You've given the audience a little bit of a suggested listening direction for this one. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure, I'm here, you're here, and you know the suggestions, so of course. I don't really do this kind of thing, and frankly, it annoys me when other acts, even the ones I love the most, do it. Like, as much as I love David Bowie's records, I don't really like that Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars says, play this as loud as you can or play at maximum volume or whatever. Like, hey, Bowie, let me do what I'm going to do with it. But anyways, on this one, I did kind of make a very specific thing. To me, Low Fidelity, or How I Spent the Nervous Breakdown, is best experienced as a continuous 66-minute listen in 24 movements on headphones. But you'll do what you're going to do with the record anyways, which is fine. That's the way it's designed. If I get to tell David Bowie, no, I will listen to Ziggy Stardust however I darn well please. Marc with a C is such small potatoes, then absolutely please disregard and enjoy it however you'd like. The last thing I'm going to do is police how you enjoy something that I made when you're being nice enough to take time out of your day to even consider my very left of center type creations. I'm just lucky you're paying attention at all, whoever you are. But I did make this one quite specifically, so it does have a bit of a guide in the liner notes, I do have to admit. This one might go into the dreaded pretentiousville, and I'm good with that, because most of my favorite things have been described as pretentious.
Bruce, did you have anything else that you wanted to ask, or Paige? Anything else that you want to ask of Marc?
I like the idea of let's consider it a serving suggestion of the album. I mean, as long as like you've included the disclaimer, do whatever you want with it. I think it's funny to like have a suggested listening style or environment. Like there's sometimes where I wish I could be like, this song is best enjoyed in your bedroom while it's raining, or like best enjoyed at nighttime. So I think it actually makes things a little more interesting to have like a suggested way of listening.
That's, I could have just, based on what you said, I could have skipped that whole route and just, for example, if the song was, hey, please listen to this in your bedroom while it's raining, I could have just called the track that. And then it wouldn't have seemed like a warning or, Paige, you're a genius. But I do leave at the end of that disclaimer the words, but you do you. Because, again, I'm so the opposite of a gatekeeper about art, and if I ever appear to be one, I have failed, because that is the opposite of how I think, feel, and want things to be.
Well, just to interject an archaeological dinosaur note, on the first James Gang album, when there used to be vinyl, there used to be run-out grooves, and people would etch things in them. And Bill Szymczyk, who produced the James Gang, was famous for that. So on the first James Gang album, at the end of side one, he has a little audio disclaimer that says, "Turn me over, play me again." At the end of side two, I'm sorry. And at the end of side one, the etching says, "Made loud to be played loud." So if you didn't know where to find that etching, you wouldn't get the instructions. But I think there was at least a precedent for your suggestions as to how to listen to your album.
Yeah, there's absolutely. I didn't think I was breaking any ground by saying, hey, you might want to try it this way. But to say there used to be vinyl, oh gosh, every one of my records except my very first one, at least the canonical ones, they're on vinyl, including Low Fidelity. And you mentioned Bill. I've never known how to say his name right. It's got so many wacky consonants all right next to each other, and sometimes they're consonants and sometimes they're not. But he holds a very special place in my heart because he produced The Who's Face Dances, which a lot of people they're not all about. I disagree, and I love the tones on that record, specifically the tones he got. And he was the person with the cojones enough to say to John Entwistle, of all people, John Entwistle, could you just play like a bass player? I can't mix this. What are you doing? So hats off to that person. They made a record that I love the tones of, the band hates, but it makes some I replay that album a lot, mostly because of the production and the vibe, not so much the songwriting. It's weird, isn't it? But that really speaks to how great of a producer he is. That he can change the way my favorite bass guitarist plays, and I'm still eating it up and asking for more.
Great producer. I've worked with him on many, many records, and I consider him one of my true mentors, along with Tom Dowd in the music industry.
Well, Marc, you wanna play that second song?
Sure. Do you mind if I say just a quick something about it before I jump into it?
No, that'd be great.
I've never hidden or run from or put any stigma on the fact that really the person who portrays Marc with a C, Marc Sardorius, has a lot of emotional disorders. Because of this, I often get very detailed messages from listeners when they feel seen or they believe that only I am gonna get it, at least in their contact list or their friends list or whatever. I would never out anything said in any one of those specific letters. I will, however, out what is said in every one of them. All of those situations and people could not be more different from each other. All of them. But at some point in every bit of that communication, they will say, I feel like the only person on earth. I feel completely alone, or some paraphrased variation. Because of making up songs and putting them out for 21 years, I think I've found what truly unites us, that all of us feel alone. So I decided to make up a song with that sentiment, and I hope you like it. There's something in the drinking water up in Arkansas. People feel alone while they are not that far apart. It's an epidemic, not exclusive to that state. And I guess I'll have to be the one, I'll be the one to say, if everybody feels alone, then they're part of the crowd. And if silence is deafening, then what good is sound? You are not your feelings, nor the hand that you've been dealt. And none of us are dealing all that well. From River Valley to McClair's, verging up and down. From New England to the older one, then all the way around. Is there some people claim it's flat, though that's demonstrably false. While we talk to each other inside invisible walls. And if everybody feels alone, then they're part of the crowd. And if silence is deafening, then what good is sound? 'Cause you are not your feelings, nor the hand that you've been dealt. And none of us are dealing all that well. Now, I've got no answers, but presuming that I did, I would not have the resources to implement. Just keep in mind that forever is a really long time. And if you're rejected after reaching out, at least you freaking tried. And if everybody feels alone, then they're part of the crowd. And if silence is deafening, then what good is sound? 'Cause you are not your feelings, nor the hands that you've been dealt. And none of us are dealing all that well. None of us are dealing all that well. None of us.
Yes, sir. Excellent.
There we go. That is Everybody Feels Alone, which can be found on Low Fidelity.
Nice.
Very nice, sir. Very nice. Yes.
I like how you approach that subject matter, Marc. Luckily, I've never had a mental illness or anything like that to deal with, but I think about it often how even if you're not, you're one tragedy away potentially from something kicking off, as I've seen with people that I know. So, but I like the way that you've approached that topic.
Well, thank you very much for that. And I want to zero in on something that you said about how you can be one tragedy away from it. And truly, honestly, it's funny that I brought up David Bowie, though I do like him a lot. I don't talk about him all the time or anything. I think this might be one of the only interviews about Marc with a C where I brought him up. That said, famous for being a chameleon, a musical chameleon, going through different eras, personalities, personas. Many people that were close to him attribute this to him understanding that fact and using his ability to be a chameleon to stave off the possibility of mental illness. He came from a long line of people who were schizophrenic. His brother, Terry, infamously informed a lot of his songwriting because Terry knew he was sick, but was totally fine being at the facility because at least he, I guess, felt seen there. And this was everybody in Bowie's bloodline, or the bloodline of Mr. David Jones, of course. He made his art as a way to stay healthy. And truthfully, I'm not saying I share anything in common, but it's my outlet too. I would be far worse off if I couldn't make up a song when I need to. That's why I've written so many, and I only put out the ones I think someone else might like. The songs tell me when it's time to do that, but it's my outlet to feel better, to understand the world, to try to put myself in other people's shoes, to put myself specifically and most often in the shoes of people with viewpoints that I don't understand, so I can try to get where they might be coming from. This leads a lot of the songs to sound intensely narcissistic and arrogant and overconfident, and gosh, I'm so the opposite of that, and I'm still trying to understand those that are. The only time where I'm really confident at all is, well, when people are looking at me and I get to play songs, because I know how to do that.
Well, I think music as therapy, introspection, and also connection are very important, and now more than ever.
Oh gosh, yeah. In the pandemic, it wasn't a week before every social media feed was, so did you see Tiger King? Now, I didn't see Tiger King, my friends, but since it's sort of easy pickings to mention that one, the shoe fits. When everybody was locked down in the United States or couldn't, just go to Walmart, go about their day, in 2020, everybody turned to entertainment. Every last one of us. I'm no exception. I ran at finishing a record that had been in the works for quite some time. And also ran at knowing that people were running towards entertainment and hope. Some people wanted a lot of hopeful entertainment. And things had been so bleak for the last couple of years, there wasn't a whole lot of that was right on deck and recent and ready to go. But thankfully, we had filmed a one-person show that I did in 2019 called The Obscurity Show, which is probably my proudest moment overall as a creator. And we ran at releasing that movie far earlier than it was supposed to be put out. It's on Amazon Prime, and the DVD is available at markwithac.com, should anybody be interested in that. But after I saw everybody talking about Tiger King, like, really? How did everybody land on that show that day? This is so bizarre. Well, I know at least my movie's kind of hopeful. So for those who would like left of center hope, I got that covered. Heck, the main reason I do put stuff out is not for accolades or social status or for popularity contests. This is why I was so shocked about the whole Grammy ballot thing. I put it out because maybe someone else needs it too. I needed it, that's why I made it. Everything that I release is because someone else might need it too.
That's a wonderful, wonderful goal to have.
Thank you. Absolutely. I often... I give myself this nickname as a Steely Dan-splainer. It always comes up. If you like Steely Dan, most people don't, then you just gotta get on your soapbox and go, no, you're totally misunderstanding. But how I think that even came about is musical wallpaper. You walk into Walgreens and there's, Hey 19 playing over the PA softly, or you walk into Winn-Dixie and that same Christopher Cross song is playing over the loudspeaker. And I think that when songs get oversaturated in a very broad way, every single person just hears this in the background and they're never told to focus on it. Nothing about this is interesting, nothing about this sticks out. It's just in the background so you don't have to be alone with your thoughts. I think that has played a huge part in devaluing music in the eyes of the customer, the listener, the industry, most importantly for the artists, because now they have to throw all of their weight behind the thing that they know everybody knows, because that's why they have a brand name. It just perpetuates all right, when they come back for their encore, we know what it'll be. They saved it till the end so the venue could make all the beer sales and stuff. It just continues to perpetuate that. And should the concert industry survive the pandemic, gosh, everybody's been so fragmented, listening to things on different platforms, getting into their own heads. I don't know that anybody really agrees on much of anything past the nostalgic at this point. Think about the proliferation of artists that have just come up with just one single in this pandemic. And ask yourself, what are they aspiring to? Is it to get a gig? No, you got to take that right off. Is it to impress people? If you can cut through the noise, if you can beat the algorithms. But are you doing it for the money? Well, that's just silly. At this point, if someone makes music and they kick off now, I don't know what they're aspiring to other than just wanting to put cool stuff into the world. And thankfully, pandemics give you all the time in the world to do this. Pandemics, absolutely horrible. No bright side. If there's gonna be one, we might respect some art a little more than we did before. Whoever's left, I guess. That's bleakly hopeful, but I think we're starting to value it a little more because I think it's saving all of us right now.
Well, obviously media has changed forever. The Zoom screen is what all of media has become today. And in a sense, it's the aggregation. It's coming together in a very weird way. I don't know when these 6 people would ever be in the same room together, possibly 4 or 5 of them at a time, but here we are.
I think we should cling to those words to wrap up today. Let's all be bleakly hopeful. I think that's where we are right now.
Way ahead of you. Always bleakly hopeful.
All right.
And in a bleakly hopeful mood, I want to thank you for joining us on the Reel to Reel podcast from the Melrose Center. I'm your host, Bruce Hensal, joined by my co-host, Jim Myers. We'd like to thank our guests today, Paige Coley and Marc with a C.
Thank you.
Thank you. And nice to meet you, Paige.
Nice to meet you. I'm sure I'll see you in person after vaccines.
I can't wait to be around humans. It's going to be interesting. I don't know what that's like anymore. I'm curious now. But yes, it'll be nice to meet you in person as well.
Nice. Likewise.
We have so much more in store coming up on future episodes. Make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube and follow us on your favorite podcasting app. Join us next month for another episode with another exclusive look at the life behind the board in the music industry. And thanks to Carol Hensel for our theme music.